The lake shimmered under the evening sun, its glassy surface reflecting hues of orange and pink. Oren stood on his wooden porch, sipping tea and letting the serene scene calm his mind. This lakeside town, nestled far from bustling cities, was his sanctuary. He had moved here a decade ago, seeking peace and quiet, and he'd found it in the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft calls of birds. But tonight, something was different. A low hum vibrated through the air, faint but insistent, like a distant storm brewing. Oren squinted toward the horizon, spotting a strange, pulsating light descending from the sky. It wasn't the first time he'd seen alien ships. Over the past few years, Earth had become a stopover for intergalactic travelers. The first few arrivals had caused panic, but as time passed, humans grew used to these strange visitors. Most aliens were polite, curious, and rarely stayed long. This ship, however, was unlike any Oren had seen before. Its sleek, silvery surface rippled as if alive, and the lights it emitted seemed to dance in the air. It descended gracefully, landing on the meadow near the lake. Oren hesitated, debating whether to approach or stay hidden. His curiosity won. Grabbing his jacket, he made his way down the gravel path toward the ship. As he drew closer, a hatch opened with a soft hiss, and a figure emerged. Oren froze. She wasn't like the other aliens he had seen. Her skin shimmered like liquid starlight, shifting colors with each movement. Her eyes were large, luminous, and framed by delicate, feather-like tendrils that moved independently. She wore a simple, flowing garment that seemed to float around her, mirroring the hues of the sunset. She stepped forward, her bare feet barely touching the ground. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, each word carrying an almost musical quality. "Greetings, human," she said, tilting her head. "I am Alicia, of the Zephyrian kin. I have come to experience your world." Oren cleared his throat, suddenly aware of his disheveled appearance. Welcome. I'm Oren. What brings you here?" Alicia smiled, a soft glow spreading across her cheeks. "Curiosity," she replied. "Your planet. It hums with life in a way my world does not. I wish to see it, to feel it." Before Oren could respond, Alicia turned her attention to the lake. Her eyes widened, and her skin glimmered with vibrant hues of turquoise and gold. This is beautiful," she murmured, walking toward the water. She knelt at the edge, dipping her fingers into the cool liquid. Her glow intensified, and she let out a soft, musical laugh. Oren watched, captivated. Alicia's joy was infectious, her presence otherworldly yet oddly comforting. She turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "Do you live here, Oren?" "I do," he said, his voice steadier now. "The lake's part of my backyard." Her smile widened. "Then you must guide me. Show me your world, Oren of the lake." He blinked, taken aback by her forwardness. "I'm not much of a guide. The town's small, and I don't get out much." "That is perfect," Alicia said, rising gracefully. "Small things are often the most precious. I will learn from you." Before Oren could protest, Alicia waded into the lake, her movements fluid and unhurried. The water seemed to respond to her, rippling with faint bioluminescence. She stood waist-deep, arms outstretched, her face turned toward the setting sun. Her skin glowed brighter, shifting through shades of violet and amber. "Your water sings," she said softly. "I feel it." Oren stepped closer, unsure of what to say. This wasn't like the visits from other aliens, who came, studied, and left without much fanfare. Alicia was different. She didn't just observe, she immersed herself, experiencing Earth as if it were a treasure to be unraveled. After a few moments, Alicia emerged from the lake, droplets cascading off her radiant form. She approached Oren, her expression serious. "I will stay here for some time. Will you teach me?" Oren hesitated. He wasn't used to company, let alone someone as extraordinary as her. But something about Alicia's earnestness, her unfiltered joy, made him nod. "All right," he said. "I'll show you around." Her face lit up, and her skin shimmered with a soft pink glow. "Thank you, Oren. I promise, you will not regret this." As they walked back toward his cabin, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shadows. Oren couldn't help but glance at Alicia, wondering what he had just agreed to. One thing was certain, life by the lake would never be the same again. The first morning with Alicia was unlike any Oren had experienced. She was up before the sun, perched by the lake's edge, her fingers tracing patterns in the water. When Oren stepped outside with his usual cup of tea, her head snapped toward him, and her face lit up with excitement. "Good morning, Oren," she called, her voice carrying an almost musical lilt. Her skin shimmered with hues of gold and green, a sight that still took him by surprise. "Morning," he replied, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You're up early." "Your world wakes early," she said, standing and walking toward him. "I did not want to miss the symphony." Oren frowned. "Symphony?" Alicia gestured around them. "The sounds. Birds, water, wind. They all speak, like an orchestra playing together." Oren chuckled. "I've never thought of it that way." "You should listen more," she said with a playful smile. "Your world has much to say." Alicia's curiosity seemed boundless. As they walked through the small town, her eyes darted to every flower, every passing insect, and every creak of the wooden planks beneath her feet. She crouched to examine an anthill, marveling at the tiny creature's coordination. Oren watched her with a mix of amusement and awe. Her enthusiasm was contagious, making the mundane seem extraordinary. At the local market, Alicia caused quite a stir. The townsfolk were used to alien visitors, but none quite like her. Her shimmering skin and glowing eyes drew whispers and stares, though her warm demeanor quickly won people over. "What is this?" Alicia asked, pointing to a crate of apples. "Apples," Oren said. "A fruit." Alicia picked one up, holding it as if it were a precious gem. "It smells alive." She took a bite and let out a delighted gasp. "This is incredible." Oren chuckled. "Glad you like it." Alicia turned to the vendor, her skin glowing pink with gratitude. "Thank you for this gift." The vendor, an older woman named Mirella, laughed. "You're welcome, dear. You're quite the charmer, aren't you?" Alicia tilted her head, her tendrils shifting in curiosity. "Charmer? It means you make people like you," Oren explained. Alicia smiled. "That is a lovely word." As the day went on, Oren began to notice Alicia's unique way of expressing herself. Her emotions were impossible to miss, her skin shifting colors that seemed to mirror her feelings. When she laughed, soft yellows and oranges rippled across her. When she was curious, greens and blues danced on her skin. It was mesmerizing, but it also made her vulnerable. Her feelings were always on display. "Does it bother you?" Oren asked as they sat by the lake later that evening. "Does what bother me?" Alicia replied, her fingers dipping into the water. "That your emotions are visible." She considered this, her skin glowing a thoughtful lavender. "No. On Zephyra, emotions are celebrated. They connect us, help us understand one another. But here, I notice humans hide their feelings." "Why?" Oren hesitated. "It's complicated. Sometimes, showing too much makes people uncomfortable. It's easier to keep things to yourself." Alicia frowned, her glow dimming. "That seems lonely." "It can be," Oren admitted, surprising himself with the honesty of his answer. Alicia reached out, her hand brushing his. Her touch was warm, almost electric. "I hope you will not hide from me, Oren." He looked at her, her eyes shimmering like stars, and felt a strange sense of comfort. "I'll try not to." In the days that followed, Alicia continued to explore Earth with Oren as her guide. She marveled at the library, spending hours flipping through books, her tendrils glowing with fascination. She danced barefoot in the rain, laughing as droplets slid off her shimmering skin. She even attempted to cook, though the resulting chaos in Oren's kitchen left them both in stitches. "You're a terrible chef," Oren teased, scraping a charred mess off the stove. Alicia pouted, her skin glowing a playful pink. "On my planet, we do not cook. Food is synthesized." "Well, that explains a lot." "Still," she said, poking his arm, "I made you laugh. That counts for something, yes." He shook his head, smiling. "Yeah, it does." As they spent more time together, Oren found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. He told Alicia about his art, showing her the sketches he usually kept hidden. Her reaction was immediate and genuine. Her skin glowed with brilliant golds and whites as she admired each piece. "Your hands create beauty," she said, her voice filled with wonder. You capture the soul of the world. Oren felt a warmth rise in his chest. It's just drawing, he said, though her praise made his heart race. It is more than that, she insisted. It is a gift. She asked him to teach her, and though her first attempts were clumsy, her joy was undeniable. She sketched the lake, the town, and even Oren himself, laughing as her lines grew more confident. I like this, she said, holding up a portrait she had drawn of him. It feels intimate. Oren's throat tightened, and he looked away, unsure of how to respond. Alicia's openness was both refreshing and overwhelming. She saw the world, and him, with a clarity he wasn't used to. But as their bond grew, Oren began to notice something else. There was an urgency in Alicia's curiosity, a depth to her laughter that felt almost desperate. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time, though she never mentioned why she had come to Earth in the first place. One evening, as they sat by the lake, he finally asked, Alicia, why are you here? Really? She turned to him, her glow soft and subdued. To learn. To feel. My world is fading, Oren. Its heart grows weak. I was sent to find something we have lost. What is it you're looking for? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, her skin flickering with shades of gray and blue. I do not know. But I feel it here, in your world. And in you. Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He wanted to ask more, but the vulnerability in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he reached out, placing a hand on hers. Then we'll find it together. Alicia's glow brightened, and she smiled, her skin shimmering with colors of hope. Thank you, Oren. As the stars reflected on the lake's surface, Oren realized his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. Alicia wasn't just an alien visitor, she was something far more profound. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, he knew one thing for certain: he was willing to follow wherever this journey led. The days passed like a dream, each one filled with Alicia's boundless curiosity and Oren's quiet appreciation of her presence. She had a way of bringing color into his life, not just with her shimmering skin but with her perspective on the world. Everything seemed new through her eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Oren found Alicia lying on the dock, gazing up at the stars. Her skin shimmered softly, a blend of lilac and silver that reflected her calm mood. You spend a lot of time by the water, Oren said, sitting down beside her. Alicia turned her head to him, her eyes glimmering. Water speaks to me. On my planet, we are connected to it, like a thread woven into our existence. Here, it feels different. Quieter. But still alive. She reached out, her fingers brushing the lake's surface. The ripples glowed faintly where she touched them, as if the water responded to her presence. Does it make you homesick? Oren asked. Alicia's skin dimmed to a soft blue, a sign of melancholy. Sometimes. But your world is beautiful in ways mine has forgotten. I feel alive here. Her words lingered in the air, and Oren found himself staring at her. The way her skin glowed, the way her voice carried the weight of an entire universe, it was mesmerizing. You said your world is fading, Oren said gently. What does that mean? Alicia hesitated, her glow flickering. Our connection to our essence is weakening. The energy that sustains us comes from water, but our waters have grown silent. The rituals that once nourished us no longer work. That's why I came here, to find what we've lost. Oren's heart ached for her. He couldn't imagine what it must feel like to carry the weight of an entire species on her shoulders. Do you think you'll find it? I hope so, she said softly. But if I don't, I will still cherish this. She gestured to the lake, the sky, and finally to him. You have given me something precious, Oren. A connection. Oren felt a lump rise in his throat. I haven't done much. You've shared your world with me, Alicia said, her skin glowing a tender pink. That is everything. Their connection grew deeper with each passing day. Alicia had a way of drawing Oren out of his shell, making him see the beauty in the smallest things. One afternoon, as they walked through a meadow, she stopped suddenly, her eyes wide. Look, she exclaimed, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on a flower. Oren smiled. It's just a butterfly. It's a miracle, Alicia said, crouching to observe it closely. Her skin glimmered with shades of green and gold. On my planet, We have nothing like this. Such fragile beauty. Oren knelt beside her, watching her study the butterfly with childlike wonder. You make everything seem magical. Because it is, Elisha said, turning to him with a radiant smile. You humans don't realize how extraordinary your world is. You take it for granted. Her words struck a chord in Oren. He had spent so much of his life retreating from the world, too focused on his own loneliness to appreciate the beauty around him. But Elisha made him see it, made him feel it. One evening, Elisha convinced Oren to swim in the lake with her. The air was warm, and the water was like silk against his skin. Elisha dove gracefully, her body glowing with bioluminescent light as she moved through the water. You're like a mermaid, Oren joked as she surfaced, her tendrils glistening with droplets. A mermaid. Elisha tilted her head. A mythical creature from our stories. They live in the water, like you. Elisha laughed, the sound echoing across the lake. Then perhaps I am a mermaid. But I am no myth, Oren. I am very real. As they floated in the water, Elisha swam closer to him, her glow intensifying. Do you know what water does to me? She asked softly. Oren shook his head, his heart pounding. It amplifies my emotions, she explained, her skin shifting to a vibrant pink. It makes me honest. Before he could respond, she reached out, her hand brushing his cheek. I feel something when I am with you, Oren. Something I cannot explain. Oren's breath caught. Her touch was warm, her gaze intense. I feel it too, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Elisha smiled, her glow brightening. For a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the gentle ripples of the lake. That night, as they dried off by the fire, Oren felt a shift in their relationship. Elisha wasn't just a visitor anymore, she was a part of his life. And though the thought scared him, it also filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. You've changed me, he said, staring into the flames. Elisha turned to him, her expression soft. And you've changed me. For the better. As the fire crackled and the stars shone above, Oren realized that his life would never be the same. Elisha had brought light into his world, and he wasn't ready to let it go. Elisha had been on Earth for weeks now, and her presence had become a natural part of Oren's life. Each day brought new discoveries, laughter, and an undeniable closeness that neither of them could ignore. But as their bond deepened, Oren couldn't shake the feeling that something remained hidden. Elisha had shared so much about her world and her mission, yet there were moments when her glow dimmed, her eyes turned distant, and her tendrils drooped. Oren knew there was more to her story, something she hadn't yet revealed. One evening, as they walked through the woods near the lake, Oren decided to broach the subject. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows across the path. Elisha seemed lost in thought, her glow a gentle lavender. Elisha, Oren began, his voice careful, can I ask you something? She glanced at him, her eyes warm and inviting. Of course, Oren. You can ask me anything. He hesitated, then pressed on. You've told me a lot about your world and why you came here. But I feel like there's more you're not saying. Something personal. Elisha stopped walking, her glow fading slightly. She looked away, her tendrils curling inward, a clear sign of discomfort. You're not wrong, she said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. There is something I have not told you. Oren stepped closer, his concern outweighing his hesitation. Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'll listen. Elisha turned to him, her luminous eyes searching his face. My kind, we do not experience time as you do. On Zephyra, we exist in cycles, tied to the rhythms of our waters. When our waters faltered, our cycles became unstable. Many of us began to fade. Oren frowned, unsure of what she meant. Fade. Elisha's glow dimmed to a somber gray. Our essence, our very being, dissipates without the connection to our waters. That is why I was sent here. To find what could restore us. But my time, it is limited. Her words hit Oren like a blow. Limited? How much time do you have? She looked away, her tendrils quivering. A few more cycles. Weeks, perhaps. Unless I find the answer, I will fade as well. The weight of her confession settled over Oren like a heavy fog. He couldn't imagine a world without Elisha's light, her laughter, her presence. "There has to be something we can do," he said, his voice firm. "You're not going to fade, Elisha. We'll figure this out together." Her eyes glistened, and her skin flickered with a faint pink hue. "Your determination is beautiful, Oren. But I do not wish for you to bear this burden." "It's not a burden," he said, taking her hands in his. "You're my friend. More than that, you're important to me." Elisha's glow brightened, her tendrils reaching toward him like a gentle embrace. "You are important to me as well, Oren. More than I can put into words." From that moment on, their mission became clear. Elisha and Oren spent every waking hour searching for answers. Elisha guided Oren through ancient texts in the town's library, translating symbols and stories with a skill that left him in awe. One night, as they pored over a particularly old manuscript, Elisha let out a gasp. Her glow flared to a vibrant gold, and her tendrils quivered with excitement. "Here," she exclaimed, pointing to a passage. "This speaks of the waters of eternity, a source of life that transcends worlds. It might be what we're looking for." Oren leaned closer, his heart racing. "Does it say where to find it?" Elisha scanned the text, her glow dimming slightly. "It mentions a location, a convergence of waters where the Earth's pulse is strongest. But it is vague." Oren thought for a moment. A convergence of waters. Could that be where rivers meet? Or maybe a waterfall? Elisha nodded, her excitement returning. "Yes. We must search for such a place." The next morning, they packed supplies and set out on a journey to nearby regions. Elisha's energy was contagious, her hope lighting the way even as doubts lingered in Oren's mind. Their travels led them to a lush valley where two rivers converged, creating a cascading waterfall. The sound of rushing water filled the air, and the mist sparkled in the sunlight. Elisha's skin glowed brighter than ever, her excitement palpable. "This feels right," she said, stepping toward the water. "The energy here is alive." Oren followed her, watching as she knelt by the riverbank and placed her hands in the water. Her glow intensified, and the water around her hands began to shimmer with the same bioluminescence he had seen before. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I feel something," Oren admitted, though he wasn't sure what. Elisha closed her eyes, her expression serene. For a moment, it seemed as if the water and her essence were merging, creating a harmony that was almost tangible. Then, suddenly, she gasped and pulled her hands back. Her glow flickered erratically, and her tendrils writhed as if in pain. "Elisha!" Oren shouted, rushing to her side. "What's wrong?" She clutched her chest, her breathing labored. "It is too strong. I cannot control it." Oren grabbed her hands, holding them tightly. "You're not alone. Let me help." Elisha's eyes met his, and a tear slid down her shimmering cheek. "You are my anchor, Oren. Do not let go." He nodded, his grip firm. Together, they focused on the connection between Elisha and the water. Slowly, her glow stabilized, her breathing steadied, and the chaotic energy around them subsided. When it was over, Elisha collapsed into Oren's arms, her glow soft but steady. "The waters of eternity. They are here," she whispered. "But they are wild. Untamed." Oren held her close, his heart pounding. "Then we'll find a way to tame them. Whatever it takes." Elisha smiled weakly, her tendrils brushing against his face. "You are my hope, Oren." "Thank you." As they sat by the river, the sun setting behind the waterfall, Oren realized just how much Elisha meant to him. She wasn't just an alien searching for answers, she was his partner, his light in the darkness. And he would do whatever it took to keep her from fading.